Moxie. This is a new comedy slash teen drama sort of thing directed by Amy Poheler. It's kind of like Mean Girls for Gen Z, I guess, but not as good. I don't want to get ahead of myself, though. This is based on a novel of the same name by Jennifer Mathieu that came out a few years ago. It stars Hadley Robinson, Tsai, Patrick Schwarzenegger, Nico Hiraga, Sydney Park, Josephine Langford, Gregg, and Ike Barinholtz. Also, we have Amy Poheler, who plays the mother of our main character. This came out via Netflix on Wednesday, and it's been getting mixed reviews so far. And to get us into the setup for this film, Abby, take it away. What is Moxie all about?
Sure. Moxie tells the story of a young high schooler named Vivian, played by Hadley Robinson. She is entering her sophomore year at high school. It's some kind of unspecified location in the Pacific Northwest. And her mom, Lisa, played by Amy Poheler, was kind of I don't know. She was a bit of a hellraiser in high school, and kind of riot girl style 90s feminist, as we learned from kind of her history.
Yeah, she was like if Brie Larson from Captain Marvel hadn't gotten superpowers, she'd probably be the mom in this.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. She listens to a lot of Bikini Kill, but importantly, only Rebel Girl, because that's the only song that Bikini Kill has ever produced. We'll talk about that later. But Vivian is a fairly subdued individual. She just kind of tries to get through high school without anybody really bugging her. She and her best friend Claudia, played by Tsai, are just kind of, they're sort of along for the ride. That all changes when a new student named Lucy, played by Alycia Pascual-Peña, shows up at their school and is immediately harassed by Patrick Schwarzenegger's character Mitchell, who's kind of the school jock. He's the captain of the football team.
Yeah, he's like the Brock Turner, but at the high school years.
Yes, yeah. So after seeing how Lucy is being treated by Mitchell, Vivian decides that she's not going to take it anymore. She's tired of just kind of dealing with stuff, and especially the fact that their Principal Shelley, played by Marcia Gay Harden, is really not doing much to kind of curb Mitchell's behavior and seems to be enabling it in some ways. So she starts a zine inspired by her mom's teen years called Moxie that she kind of copies and distributes out anonymously. Nobody knows that it's her doing it, and nobody would expect that it would be her doing it because she's usually so quiet. Kind of taking the culture of their school to task and asking women in the school as well as allies to kind of stand up and note that behavior is not acceptable. And she kind of finds a ally slash crush slash boyfriend in Nico Hiraga's character Seth, who is supportive of that and kind of accidentally finds out that it's her doing it fairly early on. I'm kind of torn on this because there are some elements of Moxie that are really cute. I should also note that the author of the book, Jennifer Mathieu, has some Kansas City connections. She used to work at the Kansas City Star, so it's cool to see some local representation on screen, even if the movie is kind of has some issues. I know Amy Poheler has kind of come under fire a little bit in recent years for having a kind of white-centric feminist stance. I will say that that Moxie does it does take Vivian's character to task in a couple of ways that I appreciate. There's some discussion of her ability to kind of stand out and do kind of counter authoritative action as a form of white privilege, which I think it's important that gets called out, that not everybody has the same experiences and the same freedoms. There are some elements, particularly late in the film, that feel real bad. There's one particular turn that the plot takes is very serious and kind of changes the vibe of the rest of the movie in a way that I feel like would have been better addressed up front, and it would have been more helpful to put a certain character's experiences more front and center than Vivian's, because as it stands, the way that this reveal takes place in the third act of the movie, Vivian has to react to something that has happened to another character who has been on the sidelines up until this point, and in taking a stand makes that character's trauma about her in a way that doesn't feel great. So there are some issues that I had with it that are kind of, I don't know, that take some pretty serious missteps that probably need to be looked at a little more closely. But there are some other things that I appreciate that it tries to do. But for the love of God, Hollywood, please look at the rest of Bikini Kill's discography. I swear there are more songs. There are good songs that you can play that are not necessarily Rebel Girl. And people who listen to Bikini Kill will know what they are, just like I do. And they will appreciate that you took a stance and tried something different.
Yeah. This movie, this thing really wants the 90s to come back. And usually I'm all for that. I mean, I would say the dream of the 90s is live on Netflix, you know, between this and like Everybody Sucks. And I think like 90s nostalgia is such a tricky thing. And I just don't think we've really nailed it yet, which is really weird because I feel like 80s nostalgia was already like in full swing years and years and years before, you know, the time for it had come. But I don't know. With this movie, I very much was like, oh, okay, like a fan zine that's like straight out of the late 90s. It just, to me, it felt like a comic book movie without comic books or superheroes or anything like that. It just really felt like a bubblegum kind of take on white feminism, like you're saying, particularly with like, there's a lot of people of color in this, but it does revolve around this like white girl who is inspired by people of color and uses their opinions and their stances on things to create the agency of this movie. There's a lot of weirdness around that. So I found myself rolling my eyes a lot at Moxie, but never hating it. I actually, you know, I think that it's very, very watchable. And I think that there's some fun moments in it. And I like a lot of these characters in the film, particularly Lauren Tsai. I appreciated some of the more complexities with her character, particularly with what you were talking about with how she and her friendship with Vivian kind of rang true to me. There's some stuff in here about, you know, a first relationship, about when you make new friends and how they don't click as well with your old friends. And there's clearly a lot of good intentions here. I just think that this thing clearly, it's like if your mom made a movie for the teens, this is kind of how it would turn out. We love our mom, but, you know, obviously there's going to be some things in here that feel a little off. But what do you think, Will? Do you think your mom did a good job with this film?
No, I mean, I don't want to put my mom on the spot here.
sorry.
I feel bad.
Your mom is Amy Poheler, right?
No, she is not. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm pretty in line with where Abby is on this one. To me, this felt very much like an algorithm type film, in that it felt like the type of thing that Netflix has on their site because they're like, hey, we may not have the rights to Mean Girls or Easy A or Booksmart or Bring It On forever. So like, let's have a movie that we can recommend if like these movies go off the site. And for me, that added to the artifice of it, that added to the inauthenticity of it. As Abby was mentioning, like I think the intentions of it are fine. Like I don't think it's trying to be cynical or anything like that. If anything, it's just trying to be very earnest and sweet. But the execution of it just strives to move away from anything being that authentic, that it just doesn't quite work when it does actually bring, like Abby was saying, some like very real stuff to the end in a way that doesn't really connect with the film. And I can very much tell, as I mentioned, that it's inspired by Booksmart, but I think Booksmart is able to be in this heightened world in a way that's effective because it has no preconceptions about that. Like all the characters are obviously sort of like this like heightened Gen Z type personalities, but the movie is willing to like kind of acknowledge that like we're on this like other playing field. Like we can have some real moments, but we're also like on this level throughout. And I just don't think Amy Poehler really gets that vibe throughout. It just felt like a very misstep and type thing, in that it just doesn't quite ever really find its groove. And like you were saying, John, like I know it's going for that kind of casual vibe, and I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily, but at the same time, I didn't really find myself connecting with it too much.
Yeah, I mean, those movies that you're referencing, Mean Girls, Easy A, Booksmart, they're consistently funny. And that really helps, you know, that really helps dress up the more preachy aspects of those films than it does anything else. Because ultimately, Mean Girls obviously has good intentions too. It's trying to tell a story about bullying, and Easy A is trying to tell a story about slut shaming, and Booksmart is trying to tell a story about, you know, not looking down on your classmates and thinking you're always better than them. And those are really great ideas. And this one has a shell of an idea of like, you know, don't let, you know, boys will be boys is pretty messed up when you really think about it. And this whole school is like cartoonishly it like slavish to like upholding like a very, very toxic culture. They even kind of mention in the movie there's like there's something really wrong with this school. And it feels so cartoonish and it feels so out of reach that I think that it undercuts the point or like the reforms that have to happen.
It feels like it feels like a very special episode of a school, I think. Like there's just like rampant sexism throughout, and
The principal needs to be fired.
Yes,
like,
yeah, and yeah, it's a
removed.
female principal who, like, I would have been interested to see a female principal character who is trying her best to try and mitigate a situation like this at this school, while also knowing that her hands are tied to a certain extent because of her position and who she has to work with, and also because she's generationally different, and so there are some things that she just won't know. That to me would be really interesting. And some of these other movies, like I would say Booksmart has characters that are like that. Like it's possible to do.
Yeah, Promising Young Woman. Again.
Yes, Promising Young Woman does that too. It feels very flat and simplified in a way that, I don't know, maybe works in a YA standpoint, but I mean, I don't think that there's a Gen Z teenager out there today who would watch this and think, yeah, that tracks.
Yeah, it's a shame too, because the cast here is really talented. Kind of mentioned Nico Hiraga before as kind of like the nice guy in this. He is a little bit like, okay, he can't do anything wrong. You know, they have to have like that one character, that one male character who is an ally, who isn't going to like mess up, which again, it's more aspirational than it is believable. But, you know, that's something that I appreciate. And I think he pulls it off with his performance. However, Josie Tota, not enough Josie Tota in this movie. She has proven through Saved by the Bell that like she is a truly like rising talent. And in this movie, she's such a background character and she has like way too much charisma for that. And you can kind of tell her character, without even trying, is screaming to be a bigger part of this movie. But unfortunately, I think this just was being made before her star power started to really take off. She was like a Disney Channel person. And then she is just like kind of starting to get more breakout roles. And they kind of, I think, hint toward her being transgender, but it doesn't quite go there. So I guess if you're a Saved by the Bell fan, just be prepared for that awkwardness because it definitely sticks out.
I think they are explicit about her transgender identity, to be fair, but otherwise, yeah, I do agree.
I might have missed it.
Yeah, it's not very clear. She says that the school won't call her by her new name, and that could be for a variety of reasons. The most likely of which is that she is transgender, but it's never actually said that that's why.
Right. So if you're like aware of her and like and all of that stuff, it definitely is like you can tell what's going on. But I just wish it's like, well, get into that a little bit more. Like, you know, that to me seems like something, especially in this day and age, that is much more of a contentious issue. But regardless, this movie is trying to be a little bit broader. It's trying to be a little bit more all things to all teenagers, I guess. And ultimately, I just think it's a little bit of an awkward mess. So I'm a low C+. And it's a C+ just because I think that it's trying and it gives an effort and you can definitely get through it. And I think some people will enjoy it for the most part. And I think it's ultimately pretty harmless, but I don't think it's very smart, very book smart, I guess. This is not an easy A, but I definitely don't want to be a mean girl about it. So C+ for me. How was that? Was that bad?
I say,
wow.
Don't bring it on.
Sorry, I just get a little dazed and confused sometimes.
Oh, geez, that's no.
All right. Abby Olchesi, yeah. What are your final thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I'm. I want to like this. There are things about this that I want to like, but there's so much of it that just rings false, and there are so many other movies that touch on some similar themes in ways that I think appeal more to the audience that it's trying to reach and feel more realistic to those scenarios. You know, Booksmart, everybody watch Booksmart. I would probably give it a high B-, I think is kind of where I'm at. There are things about it that are enjoyable and fun. There's some humor in it that I did like. I appreciate the portrayal of women standing up for each other. And there are some aspirational aspects to certain characters that I think it's nice to kind of see, but ultimately it's really not reaching the areas that it needs to reach. And a large part of that, I think, is because of the generational difference in focus behind the camera.
All right. Will, you're the youngest of us, and I think you actually have like a family member in like the demographic for this
Yeah.
movie. If you want to, if you want to say like, did she check this out, or if not, would you recommend this to her? What do you think?
I mean, she watched a little bit of it with me when I was watching it. I think she seemed kind of interested, but I don't know what her opinion is, so I can't speak on that. But
Little do you know, she's like at FedEx office right now, printing off copies of her own.
I mean, I will
magazine.
say, I don't know who that actor is, but the FedEx guy is probably my favorite character in this whole movie because he's one of the few characters that actually got a pretty consistent laugh out of me. Just his general, just kind of like, yeah, sure, okay, what do you want? I don't know, that worked for me. But
yeah, that's Ron Perkins.
Oh, is it?
He's
okay.
he was one of the guys in Spider-Man, the 2002 one. He was also in Prestige. I'm trying to remember. He's been on some TV things too.
Okay, I think I know who you're talking about.
You've seen him in all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think like Abby was saying, this is a movie that's pretty much at odds with itself. It's trying to be intersectional. I think it's trying to have a good spirit, like good rah-rah, attacking spirit, but I just don't think it quite sticks to landing because like we were saying, like so many of the characters, the side characters are one-dimensional and outlandish in a way that doesn't really communicate the themes of the film too well, or a way that feels authentic. And then we have these actual grounded moments in that are better, I mean, from a directorial standpoint, but they just don't jive with the rest of the film, and they just come into the story rather awkwardly. And it shows that I think Poehler is getting better as a filmmaker. Like there's an opening scene here that feels way more stylistic than anything else in the rest of the film, which I'm very curious to know about that. But otherwise, yeah, it's another film that just kind of feels like a Twitter thread in film form. And it doesn't really feel more than that ultimately, because it just doesn't quite reach that authenticity that I think is necessary. But I do agree that the cast here, the young actors, I think are generally pretty good. And I also enjoyed Ike Barinholtz. I thought he was fun for his side part. And there's also like a newscasting kind of thing that with a guy who's very consistently trying to make pirate puns that occasionally got a chuckle out of me. Like there's some things with the comedy that I don't think are bad, but by and large, I do agree with you, John, that it's just an awkward mess. And for that, I have to give it a pretty high C.
Okay, yeah. And by the way, Gregg Poehler, Amy Poehler's brother, plays one of the news anchors in this. Not the pirate guy, obviously. She doesn't have a brother that young. But yeah, I definitely want to see more from Poehler. I think that this is a big improvement over Wine Country, which I thought was just barely watchable. Like, if that. Like, that movie was just a whole lot of nothing. But this movie definitely feels a little bit like it's got something to it and got some energy to it. So that is Moxie. It is available to watch on Netflix. It is 111 minutes long, so just under 2 hours. Thank you so much for listening to our show. Be sure to subscribe to Cinemaholics on your favorite podcast app of choice, or find us on YouTube. See you all next time.